Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Elizabeth and I run the blog lifefromtheviolasection.com, where I share my favorite practice tips, general advice, and tech for musicians. To be completely honest, it's felt really hard to make YouTube videos and come on the internet with a smile on my face teaching about how to use iPads when I look out at the world around me and I see all of the bad things going on. It feels very just extra and frivolous for me to do those things right now, and I'm going to get back into making regular YouTube videos and blog posts like I've been doing. But based on talking with other musicians and just other people in my life, a lot of us feel this way, that it's so hard to carry on business as usual with everything going on around us. So I thought that today would be a great opportunity to look back at music history and see how other musicians have made art in times of strife, in awful periods of time, and kind of learn from their example, see how music affected the world around them and how it changed the course of history, and use that to our advantage as we continue to make music, because I know it feels just extra to be making music right now, but honestly, art is the most important in times of negativity, and when people are going through a lot, we often turn to the arts to either help us process our emotions, to guide us through what's going on, or just as a distraction, as a way to, keep the happiness and the light inside of us when we're trying to persevere through tough times. So I'm going to take a look at three different musicians today, three different works of music. The first will be Shostakovich's 8th String Quartet. The second will be Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time, and the third will be Billie Holiday's many performances of Strange Fruit. So just so you know, we will be talking about dark periods of history throughout the 20th century, so I just wanted to kind of offer a warning in case you're a little bit sensitive to those topics. Let's talk about Shostakovich first. So Shostakovich was a composer who was born and lived in the Soviet Union from 1906 to 1975, and the height of his career was during Stalin's rule, when art was very heavily policed and composers and artists were expected to make optimistic music, things that aligned with their ideology, and things that were easily accessible to audiences. They didn't want audiences to have to really work to decode all of the messages and everything. So there are so many pieces of Shostakovich's that are sort of double-edged swords. On the surface, they really pleased Stalin and his regime, and they accepted this music and thought that it was great. On the other side, if you look closer, there are many double meanings that can be interpreted as Shostakovich butting heads with Stalin and disagreeing with the way that he was policing art and the way that he was running the Soviet Union. So symphonies number 5 and 7 are really great examples. Symphony number 5 really has that double meaning where Stalin and the party saw it as this celebration of what was going on, and the opposing side saw that, okay, this is kind of mocking the celebration. This is mocking and going against these things that the party believes. So that is a great one for the double meaning. The 7th Symphony has a lot of history in World War II because it was written for Leningrad, and it was performed when Leningrad was under siege and was broadcast over speakers in the battle, and it's a crazy story. You can watch whole YouTube videos and documentaries just on that symphony, just on that battle. So those are two very interesting symphonies of Shostakovich's to listen to if you want more examples of musicians expressing themselves in very tough times through their art. However, I'm going to be a little bit self-indulgent today and talk about the 8th String Quartet, which is one of my favorite pieces of music. So Shostakovich wrote this 8th String Quartet out of 15 total in Dresden when he was supposed to be writing film music for a film that was on like a battle that occurred in Dresden in World War II. Instead, Shostakovich sat down and wrote his 8th String Quartet, which is dedicated to the victims of war and fascism. That is printed at the top of the score, and when you get the music, it says it right at the top of your music there. That is his dedication. The piece is very, very raw and emotional, and it takes you through this whole journey. And, if you imagine with the dedication that he provided, World War II and all of the strife and all of the things that everyone overcame, all of the awful atrocities that happened, you can hear kind of the processing of all of those awful things that people of the time witnessed and were trying to just get past, but also process at the same time. But if you look closer, the piece is also very autobiographical. So Shostakovich created a musical signature of D, E flat, C, B. If you translate this into German, it is D, S, C, H. D, the first letter of his first name, S, C, H, the first three letters of his last name. Those four notes, D, E flat, C, and B, are the outline of the melody through this entire string quartet number 8. He also used this musical signature a few other times in his career, and musicologists and just musicians in general will often see this as him kind of saying, hey, this is about me, or these are my true thoughts and feelings. So this whole string quartet is based around those four notes and the melody that they create back to back. He also quotes some previous works of his throughout the quartet, and it makes it feel almost like you're listening to a soundtrack of his whole life, just playing over and over, just throughout the string quartet. One of the most interesting parts of the string quartet for me is the fourth movement, where it sounds like knocking. It goes... And my teachers described this to me as Shostakovich waking up in the middle of the night, afraid of hearing knocks on the door from the KGB, for finding out that he was actually against Stalin. So that little anecdote has always really stuck with me for this quartet, and honestly, that fourth movement kind of strikes fear in my heart because of that. That's a terrifying thing to just imagine, having that worry. I like to think of the Eighth String Quartet as Shostakovich's way of kind of processing all that he'd witnessed in World War II as he was in the Soviet Union and in Leningrad when the siege happened, along with processing Stalin's rule, because this was written after Stalin was gone. Sometimes we just need a way to sort through all that we're feeling and experiencing, and music is one of the most human ways to do that, and I feel like this piece really, really shows that very clearly. Next, let's talk about Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time. In 1940, French composer Olivier Messiaen was captured by German forces and imprisoned at Stalag 8A, a prisoner of war camp in Gorlitz, which at the time was in Germany and now is in Poland. At the camp, he met 3 other imprisoned musicians, a clarinetist, a violinist, and a cellist. A sympathetic guard at the camp gave him paper and a pencil, and he began writing this quartet for the end of time for the instrumentalists that were available, plus for himself on piano. The quartet draws inspiration from the Book of Revelation, and particularly the idea of time ending, and not in an apocalyptic way, but in a transcendence sort of way where there's no real beginning, middle, or end of time. It's just kind of existing. And I feel like just that sentence, time is just existing, I have to imagine that's likely what it felt like in a prisoner of war camp. Time was just existing. And, you know, it must, I would think that it's so bleak and just bare. And that's how the music feels to me. It's a bit bleak. There are absolutely moments of hope, but it's very stark. And time doesn't really have rhythm. It's just existing. And so I feel that Messiaen used his faith and this story that he was very familiar with as a way of kind of paralleling his experience at this prisoner of war camp while still having some hope for the future. And he was released a few months after the work premiered. So they were able to premiere the work at the camp on June 15th, 1941, and about 400 inmates and guards were in attendance. It was a very emotional concert, and Messiaen later said, "Never have I been listened to with such rapt attention and comprehension." So in this case, I feel like this music was written to survive captivity as a means of just existing and getting through the awful atrocity that was happening at that time. Lastly, let's talk about Strange Fruit. So Strange Fruit began as a poem by Abel Meeropol. He was inspired by a photograph of the lynching of 2 black teens in Indiana in 1930. The poem was published in 1937, but soon after he set it to music, and his wife performed it in a few venues around New York City. I'll put the poem on the screen, just know it's very bleak, and it describes such an awful event. So the history is a little bit murky because different people have shared different stories, but at some point the music got in front of Billie Holiday, who was an acclaimed jazz vocalist. And in 1939, she debuted the song at Cafe Society, New York's first racially integrated nightclub. She later on said that she was very nervous to sing a song that tackled racism so head on, even at a progressive venue such as the Cafe Society, because prior to this, there weren't many songs like this that tackled racism and were so direct to the point. In her autobiography, she shared, "There wasn't even a patter of applause when I finished. Then a lone person began to clap nervously. Then suddenly everybody was clapping." She ended up performing this song for the next 2 decades of her life until her untimely death in 1959. And it was met with varying receptions. Many audience members were very upset by it. They didn't want to confront this racism. They didn't want to think about these things that have happened that they were really, really trying to ignore and pretend weren't happening. It grabbed the attention of the US government, who at the time were starting to investigate those that they thought might be associated with the Communist Party. One government official ended up really going after Billie Holiday, setting her up and arresting her for using drugs, and then eventually making it so that the hospital would deny her care, and it caused her death at the end. There were also audience members who really resonated with the song and felt very empowered by it. A lot of people attribute this song to the beginning of the civil rights movement, that it was a war cry and it really sparked something and it really ignited the start of change. It united people. So here in this example, although Billie Holiday didn't write this song, she really championed it. She recorded it. She was performing it for 2 decades and made a big deal out of it. They would dim the lights. She made sure there was absolutely no talking, and she would leave the stage with no encore after the song was finished. So this song, I feel, really raised awareness of what was going on, especially for those who were trying to ignore what was going on around them and the awful racism that was going on at that time period. And, still now there's plenty of racism as well. And this song is still performed, and a lot of artists will call back to it, like Hayley Williams performing on Jimmy Fallon a few months ago. She called back to Strange Fruit in her performance, and it was very moving and it felt very, very apt. So this song and these performances really united a movement and drew attention to something horrific that was going on. And as musicians now today, we can do the same thing. If you have something to say, you can put it to song and get it in front of more people and raise awareness for the things that you care about. So I know those are very bleak subjects and many parts of history that we don't really want to think about because so many atrocities happened, but I really do believe that it's important to look back at history in order to fully be prepared for the future and to learn from past mistakes, because there have been a lot of mistakes in history and I, for one, don't want to repeat them. So if you feel like making music is not helpful right now, I hope that you'll start to change your mind, because making art is especially important when you have something to say, when things are going on that you don't agree with. Others are going to feel the same way as you, and others can benefit from your music and what you have to share and what you have to say. So I hope that you will continue making music. And if you are thinking of a specific story in music history or a specific piece that you are identifying with at this point in time, please let us know down below in the comments, because I would love to see more examples and I'd love to see what inspires others. And I'm sure other viewers would like to see that as well. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing. I post new videos basically every Sunday at noon Eastern time. And next week I will likely have a tech video for you, more of my normal content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you keep making music.